The front door crashed open so violently that every picture on the hallway wall quivered. Frames rattled as if the house itself gasped in shock. A woman in her 50s marched straight into my kitchen, a whirlwind wrapped in bright polyester and bad intentions. Her eyes blazed with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. In her hand, a clipboard sliced through the air like a judge's gavel, and the polished HOA president badge pinned to her blazer caught the afternoon light. "This is your third violation this month," she shrieked, voice sharp enough to pierce glass. "Your grass is half an inch too tall. Your trash cans were out 37 minutes past pickup. And that mailbox, what an absolute disgrace!" I froze at the living room threshold, coffee mug halfway to my lips, watching a stranger parade through my home like she was conducting an official raid. She brushed her fingers along my countertop, checking for dust. Then, unbelievably, she opened my refrigerator, grimaced, and muttered something about unacceptable hygiene standards. "Excuse me," I said, forcing my tone to stay calm despite the shock pounding through me. "You need to leave, now!" She turned dramatically, blonde hair whipping over one shoulder. "I'm Karen Thompson, president of the Willowbrook HOA," she declared with theatrical authority, "and I have every right to inspect this property for compliance." When she reached for my phone on the counter, likely planning to photograph imaginary violations, instinct kicked in. Years of police training pulled my voice into its controlled, measured register, the same tone that once talked armed men into surrendering. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "you just committed a felony." 3 weeks earlier, I'd moved into this quiet suburban street to escape the chaos of 2 decades on the force Detective James Morrison, 20 years of service, multiple commendations, and a simple dream. Barbecues, gardening, weekends without sirens, but apparently peace had an HOA, and her name was Karen Thompson. From day one, she'd treated me like an invading army. My mailbox, 2 inches below regulation, my driveway, contaminated by a faint oil spot. Even my American flag was, according to her, the wrong shade of blue. I'd dealt with criminals more reasonable than her neighbors warned me in hushed, defeated tones. "That's just Karen," they'd sigh. "Been president for 5 years. Thinks this neighborhood is a military base." I smiled, nodded, and told myself I could handle her. I'd faced worse. But the real war began after the barbecue. It was a simple weekend cookout. A few neighbors, burgers, and old-school rock we wrapped by 8 p.m., perfectly within HOA noise limits. Yet there she was at 6:30, tape measure in hand like an inspector from hell. 4.7 feet, she announced proudly, measuring the distance from my grill to the property line. "Regulation requires 5. After that, it was psychological warfare. Anonymous notes began appearing on my door, typed in aggressive all caps. "Your hedges are asymmetrical. Your doormat is not regulation brown. Your car was parked the wrong way for 14 minutes. Some nights, flashes went off outside my window. She was taking photos over my fence. Once I caught her on a stepladder, peering into my garage like a nosy raccoon in pearls. When I confronted her, she said she was documenting architectural inconsistencies. Then came the gossip. A neighborhood Facebook group appeared overnight. Willowbrook Standards. Every post dissected my house like a crime scene. She'd even photoshopped pictures to make my lawn look dead. I almost admired the dedication. Almost. That afternoon, I was outside replacing a few warped fence boards. Quiet work, therapeutic. Classic rock hummed in my noise-canceling headphones. I didn't hear the door creak open behind me. Karen did. She'd been watching, waiting. When she saw me step to the backyard, she noticed the unlocked front door. To her, that wasn't my home. It was her next mission. She slipped inside like a thief, convinced she was a hero. Sensible Flats clicked softly on my floor. Her eyes darted around, scanning for evidence of my supposed crimes. 45 minutes later, sweat on my forehead and sawdust on my hands, I stepped back inside and froze. Karen stood at my dining table. My mail, personal letters, bills, even a birthday card for my mother, was spread across the surface in neat piles. She was snapping photos with her phone. Kitchen drawers gaped open. My notebook sat flipped, pages fluttering. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I asked, my voice dropping into that cold, deliberate tone that had once made suspects confess. She straightened, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "I'm conducting a lawful inspection. You've been reported for multiple violations." "No," I said quietly, pulling out my phone and hitting record. "You've just broken into a private residence. That's trespassing, invasion of privacy, and depending on what you photographed, potential identity theft." She scoffed, a sharp, nervous laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. The HOA charter gives me inspection rights." I chuckled softly. "Oh, really? Show me the part where it says you can enter someone's home without permission." "Go on. I'll wait." Her face turned crimson. Pages shuffled under trembling fingers. "It's implied," she stammered. "Sure," I said, stepping closer. "Let me show you something implied." I pulled out my wallet and flipped it open. The metal badge caught the light. Her entire expression collapsed. "You're a cop," she whispered. 20 years on the force, I confirmed. "And this entire encounter, recorded, multiple angles, cameras at the door, kitchen, and living room." The clipboard slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor. This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, voice shaking. "I knocked. I thought you said come in." Through my noise-canceling headphones, I raised an eyebrow. "That's some impressive hearing, Karen." Her breathing quickened. "We can work this out," she pleaded, stepping forward. "Not today," I replied, dialing Dispatch Detective Morrison, badge 4729, I said into the receiver. "Burglary in progress. Suspects still on scene." Karen's knees buckled. She collapsed into the nearest chair, face pale as chalk. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance, a sound I hadn't expected to hear at home. And in that moment, watching the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA crumble in my dining room, I realized peace had finally returned to Willowbrook. Karen sat frozen in my dining chair, her hands trembling above the table she'd just violated minutes earlier. The confident mask of the neighborhood's most feared woman had melted into pure panic. Outside, the faint wail of sirens grew louder, a sound I'd heard thousands of times on duty, but never in my own front yard. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. "This is a misunderstanding. I thought you said come in from the backyard." I folded my arms. "Through two closed doors and noise-canceling headphones?" I asked quietly. "That's creative. I'll give you that." She rose halfway from the chair, eyes darting toward the door, as if escape was still an option. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "I'll leave. You'll never see me again. I'll even withdraw every violation I filed against you." "Karen," I said calmly, "you broke into a police officer's home. There's no fixing that." Her breath hitched. "You wouldn't actually call this in, would you?" "Already did." The color drained from her face like water from a cracked vase. Moments later, flashing blue lights painted my living room walls. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb, engines low and steady. The neighborhood, silent for years under Karen's iron rule, suddenly came alive. Doors opened, curtains shifted, faces peeked out. The same people she'd bullied for half a decade now stood on their porches, watching the scene unfold like justice in real time. 2 officers entered. I recognized Martinez and Clark. Good cops, steady hands. I gave them a short briefing showing the footage from my phone. Karen rifling through my mail, opening drawers, photographing personal documents. As they watched, Martinez's brow furrowed. Clark let out a low whistle. "You weren't kidding," he murmured. Karen shot to her feet. "This is absurd," she barked, voice cracking. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I know the mayor." Martinez's tone stayed professional but firm. "Ma'am, none of that changes the law. You're under arrest for criminal trespass and unlawful entry." He turned her gently, reciting her rights as the cuffs clicked into place. The metallic snap echoed through my house like the closing of a chapter. Karen struggled, her voice rising in disbelief. "You're making a huge mistake. It's his word against mine." I held up my phone. "Actually, it's your actions, against clear video evidence." For a moment, silence. Then she slumped, shoulders shaking as the fight drained out of her. Through the front window, I could see the neighbors watching. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down, arms crossed with a satisfied grin. Bob across the street lifting his beer in a quiet toast. The same people she'd terrorized for years now stood united by relief. As the officers led her outside, Karen threw one last look over her shoulder, part fury, part disbelief. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll sue you. I'll ruin you." "Get in line," I replied. The patrol car door shut with a final definitive thud. The following days moved fast. The district attorney's office reviewed my footage and the officers' reports. Add in the witness statements, neighbors confirming she'd entered without permission, and the case was airtight. Karen Thompson, president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association, was charged with criminal trespass, unlawful entry, and attempted identity theft for photographing personal documents, maximum penalty, 3 years behind bars, and $25,000 in fines. Her husband, a local real estate attorney, tried to cut a deal, but the DA wasn't in a generous mood, the evidence was too strong, and the community too tired of her reign. When her mugshot hit the local paper, it spread through the neighborhood Facebook group faster than gossip ever had. The headline read, "HOA President Arrested for Breaking into Officer's Home." The irony was delicious. 2 months later, the courtroom was packed. Karen sat at the defense table, shoulders hunched, hair pulled back in a neat bun, a far cry from the power blazer warrior who once marched through my house. Neighbors filled the benches behind me. People she'd fined, lectured, and humiliated. All there, silent witnesses to her downfall. The judge didn't waste time. He reviewed the evidence, asked a few questions, and then delivered his verdict in a tone that left no room for misunderstanding. 1 year probation, 200 hours of community service, $5,000 in fines. Her husband lowered his head. Karen didn't move. Only when the gavel struck did her composure finally crack. Tears streaked her cheeks, not of guilt, but of disbelief that the power she once wielded had vanished. The fallout was swift. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that same week. Every member voted, unanimous decision, to remove her from the presidency. She sat silently in the back of the room as each neighbor stepped up to recount their experiences. The 2-inch grass fines, the constant photos, the late-night inspections. By the end, even her closest allies wouldn't meet her eyes. Her real estate agency dropped her soon after, citing damage to the company's reputation, and the same Facebook group she once used to shame neighbors turned into a celebration thread of freedom. Willowbrook without Karen. Her once pristine reputation, the symbol of control and order, was gone. I didn't feel joy, not really. What I felt was closure. Weeks later, I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes down the street. The lawns looked greener. People smiled more, even the air felt lighter. Mrs. Chen waved from her garden. Bob shouted across the road, "Barbecue this weekend, detective?" I smiled. Wouldn't miss it. The memory of that day, her voice, her arrogance, the sheer audacity, was fading, replaced by something this neighborhood hadn't had in years: peace. As I turned to go back inside, I glanced at the spot on the floor where her clipboard had once fallen. A small crack in the tile remained, a faint reminder that sometimes even the toughest walls break. And sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom, just a camera, a badge, and the courage to finally say, "Enough."